So let's jump into this. So this is actually for you guys who have done the course and everything. You guys have kind of seen some of this, but I think this will remind you guys. I think a lot of times we don't need more information, but we do need reminders. This will be a really good one. So just a review from the 10,000 foot view, so to speak. There's three phases, right? If we include maintenance as a phase, the first one is the cut. We all know this one. So wherever we're starting from, our calories are up there somewhere. We decrease those, put us into a calorie deficit. We lose weight. We do all this stuff. But the end goal is what's important, right? We have a body fat percentage as the end goal. Now, for men, the research is under 15%. For women, less than 20%. From what I've seen, especially if we're using in bodies, less than 20% for women for sure, and then less than 10% for men is typically the goal. And then once we get there, if you're happy with how you look, then chemically we have the right, so to speak, to increase those calories back up in a way where you will not gain all that weight back. And then the idea here, if you notice, like the starting point of this little blue dot is lower than this one. Okay, that's on purpose, right? So the idea is that we want to get you to be able to take in more calories than you even were at the start of the diet. If you do that, you're going to be able to maintain easily, because that just means that essentially if you were eating on your own for a week, like those little things that like the insurance companies have, they can plug into a car, they know everything about your speed and how many often you stop and all that crazy stuff. If I had one of those for you calorically, where I could plug it into you, which I would give anything in the world for that, by the way. But if I could plug something in, I would know exactly how many calories you took in, even though you didn't even know. And you went on a week on your own, not purposely overeating, not purposely undereating, just eating as you. And let's say you came out to eat 3,000 calories, right? That I would want you to be able to maintain your current weight at 3,000 calories. To me, that would mean you're successful. That means you can go out about your day and do your thing and live normally, and you'll be good to go because your body is now burning 3,000 calories, and so you can eat your normal intake without having to weigh or measure anything like that. If you can only maintain at 2,000 calories, let's say, and you want to eat 3,000, meaning that if you go off onto your own, eventually you start to eat 3,000, then you're just going to gain weight back at some point, right? Unless you modify your lifestyle heavily so that you now only eat 2,000 left to your own. Does that kind of make sense? So the idea is that you want to be able to take in a lot of calories on your own without gaining weight. And if you do that, you can successfully maintain. So the thing that I want to answer for you guys to make clear is why this is important and then how you can actually do that. Okay, because this part is really, really, really important. And without understanding that, it kind of, gets lost a little bit. So why reverse diet? Simple. We don't want to stay on low calories forever, right? We all kind of know that. By being lean enough first, we can take advantage of several physiological factors that positively influence the effectiveness of a bulk or reverse diet. Or in other words, just the increase of calories. We can take advantage of that and we can use that if we're lean enough first. Thus, we can increase our calories and not gain fat. The point of this that's really important is to note that you will increase calories, okay? Everybody will, okay? What I mean by that is whether it's by design or you're simply coming off the gas in terms of dieting. In other words, you're just coming off the gas, meaning that you're not being as diligent, you're not tracking as much, not being so obsessive with what you're doing. All that means, all we're saying in essence, is that you're slowly going to increase your calories back up. Nobody here is eating 1,200 calories on their own, right? Nobody here is going to go unplugged and eat 1,500 calories, 1,200 calories, whatever calories that you're dieting at right now. You know that you're not going to do that just offhand, right? If you have a week to your own or a day on your own, you eat the way that you want to. I can promise you're not going to eat 1,200 calories, right? It takes a lot of work and a lot of awareness to eat that low in calories, okay? Put another way, once you go back to doing your thing, you're going to eat more calories, right? Everybody is going to. It's just a matter of, is your body in a position where you can actually take advantage of that and do something with it, or are you simply just going to gain your weight back? That kind of makes sense. Everybody knows they're not going to eat low calories on their own, right? Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure. Somebody told me they eat 1,000 calories in the room. Which is definitely not true. So why do you have to be lean enough? All right, so we understand, okay, once I come off the gas at some point, if I'm not dieting so strictly, my calorie intake is probably going to go up. I'm telling you, we need to be lean enough before that happens. But if we are lean enough before that happens, we can make advantage of that. So why is it important to be lean enough? This is the part that I think a lot of you guys, if you understand this, I think you'll better be able to stick to the plans of getting lean enough. Because this is the part that I feel like is a little bit of a mystery, where people don't necessarily understand why does it even matter how lean I am before the calories go back up. And this hopefully will answer it. It all comes down to something called poor nutrition partitioning. Nutrition partitioning is literally like it says, it's where the nutritions are being partitioned. It's whether it's going towards fat or towards muscle. And this is greatly, greatly dependent on how lean you are. And there's several reasons why that is the case. There's chronic inflammation, there's anabolic resistance, there's poor carb tolerance, and then suboptimal anabolic hormone levels. All of these guys basically influence whether calories go towards fat or they go towards muscle. And all of these guys are heavily impacted by how lean you are. Okay. So this can all be kind of summarized, and this is what you'll see in the research as something called a P ratio. P ratios stand for protein ratios, which refer to the proportion of weight gained or lost that is lean mass. Technically, that's not just muscle, it's also water, but for our purposes, we're thinking muscle. It's a way to measure nutrition partitioning. So this is essentially how you can measure nutrition partitioning. How well, let's say if I'm gaining weight, is that weight being gained towards muscle rather than fat? That would be the P ratio, okay? The lower your body fat percentage, the higher your P ratio tends to be when overfeeding. This means the leaner you are, the more muscle you gained and not fat when consuming excess calories, okay? If you guys want to look this up on your own, Forbes is the guy that kind of brought this out initially. This has been proven repeatedly after this, but Forbes was kind of one of the main researchers who demonstrated this. And we can summarize it in this graph. All right, so this is really, this alone can summarize the entire reason why we need to be lean enough before we bulk. Essentially, if you're looking at this, the y-axis is going from top to bottom. The x-axis is going from left to right. Okay, you'll notice that on top to bottom, this is the fat-free mass to body weight change. So essentially, how much of your weight is changing is muscle. Okay, and then on the bottom is pretty simple. It's just the initial fat mass. Okay, so how much fat mass was on the body. All right, so the more left you go, the less fat mass is on the body before starting some sort of overfeeding. So imagine they sampled how much fat they had on the body before somebody went to overeat, okay? And then they measured when they were overeating of the weight that they were gaining, how much of it was muscle, okay? The more left you went, i.e. the less fat that the person had on their body before overeating, the higher those points became, meaning that the more weight that they were gaining was muscle rather than fat, okay? This perfectly depicts why we do exactly what we do. Again, when you're in a deficit, your calories are really low, purposely low. Eventually, whether you're doing it purposely or not, those calories will go back up, whether you're trying to purposely do it to gain muscle or to increase your calories purposely, or you're just going back to eating a normal life and not being so diligent about what you're eating. Either way, those calories will go back up, right? Once you get to maintenance or pop into a surplus, which is where your weight will start to move, whether that weight increase is going to be muscle or fat heavily depends on how much fat you had before that happened, okay? That's what this graph is showing. The less fat that the person had on the body in total, by the way, this isn't even going after body fat percent, this is just total fat mass. The more that the weight gain or weight change that happened was purely muscle, which is super, super, super important. Because again, we want to be able to increase our calories. We want to be able to hit maintenance or possibly even gain a little bit of weight if we're not careful, right? We all know that 1 week or a couple of days out there, our weight can pop up a little bit, right? We want room to breathe, right? If we're trying to maintain, we can't be so crazy about our calories all the time. We want the freedom that if if I gain a little bit of weight, I want it to be muscle, right? I don't want every time I weight to go up 1 pound just to be fat, right? That would suck because then I have to cut a little bit just to get rid of it, right? This is the ticket out of that. Okay, this is what this is showing, what the research pretty much concludes. We'll get into why this is the case in a second. I'll kind of break it down a little bit, but this is the overall summary that the less fat you have on the body, if you do begin to gain weight, it will be muscle. Okay, now, why is that the case? There's a bunch of factors involved that create that P ratio graph. That basically, the leaner you get, the more positively you are to be, or the more likely you are to gain muscle. There's a bunch of reasons. Anabolic resistance is one of them. And you guys can always look at this little magical PubMed ID if you guys actually want to check these things out. But higher body fat is linked to lower protein muscle synthesis response to food and training. So MPS, or muscle protein synthesis, is essentially your body recovering to build more muscle. Okay, you have a lot of basically a proportionate decrease in muscle protein synthesis with body fat. So the higher fat, the less response you have with MPS, the less muscle you can build, literally. This is overweight individuals often show blunted protein synthesis after eating protein or training, meaning calories and protein are less effectively used for muscle growth. So think of it like, you have the instructions to build the house, you have the materials to build the house, but the workers are really fucking lazy. That's pretty much what happens, right? You got all the stuff there. You may have the training, you may have the protein, you have the stuff to build the house, but the workers are like, nah, fuck this. And so you don't really build the house, right? That's pretty much what's happening. Now, poor carb tolerance is another issue. So being overweight leads to insulin sensitivity issues, making you less tolerant of carbohydrates. This poor carb tolerance has also been shown to decrease muscle protein synthesis. Again, the reason that happens is because of decreased mitochondrial function. So mitochondria plays an important role with your power output and how much energy you're basically putting into maximal contractions or working out. And essentially, your mitochondria can't function that great. If it's not functioning that great, you can't put that much power out, which means you won't adapt as much. So this is coming from a completely different side of things, more so the ability for your body to produce force, essentially. Now, we also have chronic inflammation. So to build muscle effectively, your body needs low inflammation at rest. When you work out, your body creates a sharp increase in inflammation, which is normal and helps trigger muscle growth, right? Not all inflammation is bad, right? When we work out, we should have inflammation. It's kind of like the sign, the flare in the air, so to speak. It's like, hey, come over here. Like, let's fix this shit. However, carrying too much body fat leads to constantly high inflammation, which can block muscle growth, namely through something called IL-6, but we won't get into that too much. To grow muscle properly, it's important to be lean and follow an anti-inflammatory diet. It helps your body use nutrients more effectively for muscle growth. So imagine, I always give the analogy, the really weird analogy of being in a forest, right? If you wanted to find one tree in particular and send your resources to that tree. So if I had a team that really wanted to see one tree in the forest, right? It would be really easy for me to light that one tree on fire, right? If that tree and only that tree is lit on fire, we're going to be able to see that thing a really far distance away, right? I'll be able to see it, pinpoint it, and we'll be able to run towards it very quickly. We'll be able to solve that tree, find that tree very quick. Now imagine we're trying to do the same thing when the entire forest is on fire, right? It is impossible. It's almost impossible for us to even find a tree. And even if we did, the resources that we have to spend on that one tree is going to be really hard because we're looking all over the place. Maybe one of us finds a tree and the whole team is out somewhere, right? This is pretty much what happens with muscle growth and inflammation. If you work out, there should be a sign that says, hey, come here, right? That brings the resources to you. If your whole body is inflamed, it's going to be really hard to pull the resources to that one area. And inflammation and body fat levels are really tightly correlated. So yet another reason why it's hard to properly build muscle. And then another reason is hormones. So anabolic hormones level decline in overweight individuals. Even at 12% body fat or higher, there's a clear inverse relationship between body fat percentage and anabolic hormone levels in men. With women, not so much, but in men, absolutely. But even 12%, meaning that being at 11%, your anabolic hormones will improve than being at 12% body fat. That's pretty crazy. Being 13% body fat will be worse than 12%, which would be worse than 11, right? And anabolic hormones are pretty much the control centers for muscle mass. One of the issues, by the way, is anybody's curious why men have such issue with this, is that fat tissue creates the aromatase enzyme. So if you guys ever hear of AIs or aromatase inhibitors, essentially prevents estrogen from being, or prevents testosterone from being converted into estrogen. But for men, the aromatase enzyme is actually increased with the more fat tissue. It's actually partly generated from fat tissue. So the more fat they have, the enzyme kicks up and actually takes more of their testosterone and puts it towards estrogen, which is not cool for dudes. So as we concluded, being lean enough is important because it directly affects how your body processes calories and whether they are stored as fat or muscle. When we increase calories, the goal is to either intentionally enter a surplus to build muscle, or simply to increase your calories, or at the very least to test the limits of how many calories we consume before gaining excess weight. Therefore, we want to ensure that our bodies can use the surplus to build lean muscle rather than store it as fat. This is the key to eating more without gaining fat or falling into the cycle of yo-yo dieting. Now, one other little tidbit before I kind of summarize all of this. Most research shows no correlation between the size of a surplus and muscle growth. I.e., the more you eat does not equal the more muscle you can gain. Okay, I want to make this point pretty clear because you may infer that from everything that I've been saying, but that is not the case. However, there is a clear difference between being in a deficit versus a surplus. Not just the size of one, but the fact that you are in one. What I mean by that is muscle growth is benefited by being in a surplus, meaning that you can probably gain more muscle if you're gaining weight, if you're in an actual calorie surplus, okay? But it is not correlated to the size of a surplus. So if I'm overeating by 1,000 calories, that does not have any impact on me gaining more muscle than if I'm overeating by 100 calories. The fact that I'm overeating is what got the benefit. Does that make sense? And this is really important because a lot of people will, if they are lean enough, they sometimes will have clients where they get to the reverse diet part, it's like, oh, I'm good. And they kind of do their thing and think they can just increase calories. But that is not good either because the size of the deficit or the surplus is very, very important. If you just keep increasing your calories and you just gain more weight, it's not going to make you gain more muscle because the extent to which you can actually generate muscle is capped. The fact that you're in a surplus will help muscle growth, but how much weight you gain is dependent on that, right? So if we go back to this graph, okay, the leaner you were before you started to gain weight had a really big impact on how much muscle of that weight was gained. So if I gained, I'll just make up random numbers so this makes sense. Let's say I was 10% body fat and I gained 10 pounds, maybe 8 of those pounds were muscle. Cool. Now, maybe if I was 20% body fat, only 4 of those pounds were muscle, right? And I gained a lot more fat than muscle, okay? What I'm also saying, though, and this is where it gets tricky, is let's say I gained 20 pounds instead of 10. The numbers aren't going to match up. So let's make it like super simple numbers so that it doesn't get confusing. Let's say I gain 10 pounds, right? And 8 is muscle. That doesn't mean that if I gain 20 pounds, it's going to be 16 pounds of muscle. Does that make sense? The size of how much I'm overeating is not the same as how much muscle I'm going to gain. Okay, so that's important because a lot of times when people do get into the reverse diet, they get a little lazy with it, and they're not really kind of being tight with their calories, and they kind of let themselves, overeat, even though they're already overeating. Remember that if I'm giving you a surplus and you're gaining weight, you are literally overeating by definition, right? You're gaining weight. You're eating so many calories that you're gaining weight because you're not using them all. You are overeating. And sometimes people forget that, and then they overeat on top of that. And even though you may be lean and you're doing all the strength work, you still aren't invincible. And that's where people can still screw up. But you have to be overeating by a lot. Okay, so like you still are subject to being human, but you're giving yourself the best chance of success the leaner you are before you come off of dieting, if that makes sense. So just to kind of recap this thing, there's a bunch of reasons for this, but the reason, or you want to first get the body fat percent down to the goal. Once you're here, your body's basically saying, hey, we're all clear. We're ready to gain muscle. We're ready to take all these incoming energy that you'll give me and put it towards muscle to a point. If you go too many calories over, yeah, you can gain fat, but you have a really good luxury there. Okay. That allows you to keep increasing your calories. Okay. The first thing you want to do is just get out of a deficit. Let's say you're under eating by 500 calories, right? Say you burn 2,000, we tell you to eat 1,500, you're losing weight because you're in a deficit. Okay, we get lean enough, now we want to come out of a deficit. So maybe we increase you by 100 calories a week, right? After 5 weeks, you have those extra 500 calories back. Now you would be at maintenance, in quotes, okay? But because you're so lean now, you're probably going to be burning way more calories than you would have before. So maybe we can go a couple more weeks. Maybe we go to 2,100, 2,200, 2,300, and you're still not gaining weight because your body's burning a lot more than before. That's the first benefit of being lean. The second benefit is that we can go into a surplus. We can actually have you gain a little bit of weight and have it just be muscle. So maybe now we go to 2,400. 2,500. Oh, your weight's going up a little bit, but because it's barely a surplus, it's all muscle. Now you're eating 2,600, 2,700 calories and your weight is barely moving and you're just as lean as you were at the end of the cut. Okay. This is how I can get people to almost double their calories in like a month or two and stay just as lean because of that. And then you can take that anywhere you want to. You can keep increasing muscle if you want to, if you're doing it steadily enough. And the more muscle you have, the more calories you burn. It's a compounding interest. So like now you can burn even more calories and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, if you aren't lean enough and you don't progress up properly or slowly enough, then you will just gain all the weight back. Your body won't be able to use it, right? But being lean enough kind of opens that door to being able to use it. All right, so I'll stop there because I know there's a lot. My screen still showing this thing? Yeah, right. Here we go. All right, so by the way, if you guys have to leave or something, you don't have to like be polite. You can just dip. It's fine. But who has questions? You can type them. You can yell at me. You can do whatever you want. I want to make sure you guys like really understand this part because this is really, really important. This is the only thing that's going to prevent you from just gaining weight again, even though you lost it, or from having to eat really low calories the rest of your life, which is just as bad, I would say, or maybe worse. I don't know what's worse.
Devin,
Yeah.
was somebody asking a question before me?
No.
I don't want
All
to
you.
interrupt. Only me. Okay. I am very concerned about never getting to that 20% body fat. And I am kind of like going up and down within like I would say 2-3 pound range every week,